On this episode of the Dudes and Dads podcast, we talk to our friend Jake from Into the Light.
You're listening to the Dudes and Dads podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Andrew?
Joel, do you know what today is?
Andy, I think I do, but I want you to tell me so I can breathe it in. I can experience it.
Season 7.
Season number 7.
Episode 1.
Episode 1
of the Dudes and Dads podcast.
Andy, this is a significant milestone.
It's interesting that, though, people assume that we've been going for 7 years, and it's actually been 6.
Right, because when you start season 7, that means you've been at it for 6 years. Because season 1 is year 0.
Year 1.
Year 0.
True.
That's how a timeline works. That's how math on a scale.
I've never been good with math, so
you know
there's
what?
that.
It's okay. Andy, yes, here we are. Everybody, season 7 of the Dudes and Dads podcast. Glad to have each and every one of you along for this ride, these conversations that we have.
Mm-hmm.
This year, Andy, maybe we always look forward to welcoming new people on board into the community.
Yeah.
And this will be another year of we just say, come on in, the water's fine.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited. We haven't officially fleshed out the whole season yet. We don't normally do the whole season.
Yeah, in typical Andy and Joel fashion, given the fact that we're raising 100 children, managing numerous both job and volunteer responsibilities, we the Dudes and Dads podcast is a labor of love, but it is a labor of finding the time
to do things.
So planning some stuff. We'll get there. It'll happen. It'll happen.
But you know what I'm sure of, Joel? This season is going to bring back other guests too, like tonight's guest. Actually, too, tonight's guest is a repeat guest.
Listen, we've talked about this. There is a special Hall of Fame for the repeat guests.
I'm going to just bring him on right now too. But this is Jake. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jake.
Oh my goodness, Andy, that segue was clean.
Yeah, isn't that so great?
That was wonderful.
But no, I mean, we have talked about it. My wife has been on 3-4 times now, and last time she was on, she said, Annie F. Downs has this like trophy that you get to have your plaque on when you've been on so many times, and so we need to do that for real, Joel.
We will refer to them as repeat offenders. That's that'll be.
And so far, this is Jake's second side. This is not 3. This is
We talked about the numbers. Yeah, our friend Jake from Into the Light back. We were just talking, and Andy did a little research because sometimes we forget how long it's been. So, Jake, your episode, you were on with us last March 21st of 2023. Which in the show notes we'll link that first episode. So if people are interested in going back, but man, we feel like. These days, so much happens in 2 years. So we think it necessary, number one, Jake, for you to do a quick recap on what in the world was going on. You were on the precipice of things 2 years ago with Into the Light. I think, number one, refresh us. What's Into the Light all about? What were you working on then? And then we'll dive into where you guys are now, because we've got some new and exciting things that are about to drop that we want to share. That's all the teaser I'm going to do, because we're here to interview you and hear from you. So tell us, give us the background, and then we'll get to today and all the good stuff happening now.
Totally. Okay, so when we chatted last time, our ministry had just released our documentary. And basically, our ministry was just the documentary. So, and how when an album or when a band makes an album, they call the album the same thing as the band's name.
Right.
There might be a technical term for that, but like we did the same thing, and sometimes now we regret it because we have like Into the Light Ministries, and like it's a ministry. We work with different authors and speakers to create video resources on biblical sexuality. So it's pretty broad. There's a lot of stuff in there. And then we have Into the Light, the documentary, and that documentary is a teaching resource that helps people think about the issue of pornography and walk through that from bondage and sexual sin to freedom in Christ.
Mm.
So it's a resource that kind of straddles the line between a film and a counseling teaching resource, and hopefully is watchable and entertaining and convicting. A lot of gospel, and so we had just released that when we had talked with you last, and basically kind of the whole of that last podcast, which I have to say I had a lot of fun doing it. Was basically us just talking about the process of making that film and a little bit of some of just even in that first little bit, the reactions we'd gotten to making it, and yeah, that was really, really fun. So that's what I was doing then. Since then, our focus has really shifted as a ministry. Kind of the next phase has been for parents, because we made this resource. We basically made this resource, and parents would come to us and be like, "This is really helpful for someone who's caught in pornography and needs the hope of the gospel.
Hmm.
How do I talk to my 8-year-old?
Mm.
Or do I talk to my 8-year-old?
Mhm.
And how do I have the talk? And how do I talk about pornography and all of these things?" And so we felt like dealing with the issue of pornography with the Into the Light documentary was really straightforward. The Burning House Fire. You guys know this.
Yep.
You run a podcast for men. It's like, this is an issue.
Hmm.
The next biggest issue is like, and I'm curious if you guys are willing, I want to hear a little bit of your stories with this. Most people, even my age, are like, yeah, my parents didn't talk to me
Hmm.
about
Mm.
pornography. I'm sorry, my parents specifically did, but most of my peers, their parents didn't talk to them about the issues really at all. And they kind of navigated this world of learning about sexuality just through whatever they found. And often whatever they found was pornography. And so now kind of that generation starting to have kids for the first time, really being aware of like, I need to talk to my children about this. And so that's where we are right now. We are, as of recording this, I think we might release it later.
Hmm.
Well, I'll say it, January 18th, whether this is before or after, two major resources that we're building will be released. The first one is Parenting and Pornography, Roadmaps to Raising Children of Integrity. It's a 9-part masterclass series with some incredible people like Dr. Moeller from Southern Seminary, Abby Halberstadt, Jonathan Holmes, Justin Whitmore Early, all talking about this topic. How do you talk to your children about God's good design? How do you warn them about the dangers of pornography? How do you think about technology in the home? How do you think about your own fear and terror when it comes to talking about this topic, or your current struggle with pornography? So that's a resource that we're building, and like, I'm so incredibly stoked about it. We filmed it with a live audience and did all that stuff. It's really cool.
Sweet.
And the other series that we're releasing, because we realized, we're like, okay, you can go through the good biblical foundations in the theory, but then every single parent is like, okay, I've got this in my home. I have these phones, these laptops, these tablets, these gaming consoles, these smart TVs. How do I think about the devices in my home and make them safe? And so we built a tutorial set walking through all those devices, a video for each one, walking through them theologically, knowing that technology is a good gift from God, but just radically being like, and we're going to lock these things down so that explicit material cannot be accessed. And so we really spent a lot of time researching and building that series to help parents really within a few hours be able to kind of take a handle on their home and make it safe,
Mm.
either for the 8-year-old who doesn't know what they could find, or the 13, 14-year-old who knows what they're looking for to stop them, or
Sure.
however that brings.
That's a
So
pretty big task to take on. I mean, there's so many different devices, and so how did you research that to figure out, okay, what devices should we start with? What devices, because again, each device is going to be a little bit different on how you set that up.
totally. Okay. It depends how nerdy you want to get as far as, so that's a production question, right?
You go as nerdy as you want to go.
Hold on. Okay. So basically, here's your scale. On one end, you have abstractions so broad as make sure you cannot access explicit material on a device, to which we all say amen, and that doesn't help me at all. I just
Mhm.
know that that's true. And then on the other end, you have click this app, scroll to this menu, tap that menu. And that's really helpful. That's really cool. The problem with that is that's so expensive to make for
Mm.
your Samsung Plus, your Huawei, your like, it gets we're talking thousands of videos at
Mhm.
that point. And they'll be obsolete within about a month because as soon as Android or Apple OS or iOS or any of these platforms update their, all it has to do is have uh, one setting move to another place
Yep.
and suddenly your video is invalid. So what we basically did was we spent, I don't know how many miles we walked, like maybe 200 miles worth of pacing the neighborhood, trying to figure out at what resolution to get these
Mhm.
videos. We basically tried to bring them as practical as we could, but yet still making them something that will live over for several years. And then we did the research to figure out whether that was true. And we I think we got them at about where they need to be. So we talk about one of the videos is just for phones.
Okay.
And then we walk through those principles and be like, what do you need for a phone? Okay, well, you need a dedicated uh, accountability software on the phone. We partnered with Covenant Eyes on this project, so we rep them
Mhm.
tremendously because I think they're awesome. Another one is Accountable to You. They're great. And then so we say, okay, the details of installing Covenant Eyes specifically, we give more resources. So in sort of our version of show notes, we point people to specific web pages for that. But at least we walk them through, okay, but more than that, what makes a good accountability system? So you should be able to monitor, filter, and block, and do that at an app level with an accountability software or a router level. Router level, what's that?
Mhm.
Great question. We built a video on that. Okay, router level security. And then we kind of walk through all of that looks like. And there's at some point where eyes start to glaze over with this. Like, yeah, because in a podcast, this gets really tedious. But we made these videos really funny, actually. At least I hope so. They're quite there's aspects of them that are quite silly, and hopefully entertaining. Because if we can
Mhm.
entertain you and tell you about your Wi-Fi router at the same time, then we win and
Yes,
praise God.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there is and I know this is a fresh conversation in our household.
Mm,
We've really struggled, I think, with technology on the side of when installing things or doing things, it like just massively messing up our technology use in general. Like things don't work the way
mm,
that they used to, and so it's like this otherwise harmless app or thing that we were doing no longer works the way it did, and a lot of it has to do with getting kind of digging down into the minutia of I was like, gosh, I didn't think I was going to have to be like a tech security person, and I think that's the talking with other parents, that's one of the biggest things. Like the whole managing of all of this feels like another full-time job, and you're trying to be responsible with it. And yet, it's like if I have to like personally punch in a security code to one of my kids, to one of my kids' devices every single time that they want to watch whatever something reasonable and all of that,
mm,
that feels difficult. But on the other side, to say well, we're just gonna take a hands-off approach or whatever is really, it's like giving them a loaded gun, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's there's a level of frustration. There's probably been a fair amount of yelling in our home of I'm so tired. I'm so tired of this not working the way I want it to, or and things like that. So I think that's the other thing of I would just cheer on anybody who's trying to give us access to,
mm,
because this topic comes up on the show
Oh
frequently,
yeah.
and in Andy's world, being professionally in technology all the time. I know, to your point, it's like it's an ever changing landscape, um,
mm,
and it feels like the forces that be out there are evolving and changing quicker than what we're keeping up with most most of the time. Um,
mhm,
I'm wondering if you, in doing all this and kind of being in this space, like, and I don't know the full details on it, but like policy, like adult content policies, like state by state, like there's been like legislative things that have come out.
Well, and not to mention I mean, you right now are physically in Canada, so that's even different from the United States.
Yeah. So
Ye-
so I wonder, like, if you have a general sense right now of where the battle lines are being drawn in terms of just safety, like policy, around, because I'm
Mm.
sure you guys have run into that, or the differences in different places. What what is the push right now? What is the hope policy wise, like, to try to make these things safer? Because I want to give people, again, an accurate depiction of what's actually going on, because I'm also like, because I think it can be like, well, oh, it's now in the state of Indiana, there's this policy that's, keeping, to keep children safe. And I just have if you'll forgive me, a slight suspicion that it doesn't roll out exactly like that, is because it's like the moment a policy is put in place, it's like, well, my kids are smart enough to get around that,
Right.
or whatever. So
Right.
I just, if you would just have any kind of input on what those policy conversations have been like, what state federal government agencies are attempting to do or not attempting to do, and then, like, how that might actually affect, what we're doing right now as parents, people on the ground trying to help our kids.
Totally, totally. I can give a shot at some
Sure.
thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll straight up though, mostly not my
Yeah.
wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mostly because, and I'll kind of explain why. So the first thing would be, we're at a point now that gives me a lot of sympathy for the parents maybe a half generation ago, even like
Mm.
10 years ago or so. Because I think about 10 years ago, you kind of had this idea like, oh, you're not giving your 16-year-old a phone or
Mhm.
12-year-old a
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
Like,
How dare
oh,
you?
how dare you? And now you can be like, yeah, my kid's not getting a phone till 16. And even the most the most liberal parents kind of go, I mean, yeah, fair enough, right? Like,
Right. Yep.
maybe
Right.
not the path we take, but I get it. It's the internet. We know.
Hmm.
And so there's kind of a generation that we felt the burn of just like, mind slush and TikTok and then porn, all the things, not to throw TikTok under the bus any more or less than anyone else. But I think now parents have an easier time, I think, navigating this. The idea that you would want to protect your kids from stuff online, even if that's just framed as like predators online, is just more palatable.
Mhm.
You see that reflected in the legislation. Like
Mm.
the fact, and it's only recently that multiple states have really been pushing, and the war they fight, which is a great tactic, is for like ID, right? So Pornhub is allowed everywhere, but in certain states, you'll need to have more and more sophisticated ID measures.
Mm.
And then Pornhub, in particular being the biggest one, basically just says, with all love, screw you. We're not going to have access to in your state, which I think most porn users go, okay, we'll use something else. And that kind of exists at a resolution where, like, as a Christian, I kind of say, who cares?
Mm.
Because for me, there's plenty of legal explicit material that is easily used in a sinful way that is going to stay forever, right? Like if you go on Instagram and well, don't scroll too far, you'll find people trying to suck you onto their page, posting as much as they can possibly get away with.
Mhm.
And it's very easy to lust in a Matthew 5 way after this content, even if it's not technically pornographic.
Sure.
And so that becomes just as much of a problem that has to be worked through with children, both in a discipling way and then in a content way as
Yeah.
well. That gets into like Christians are just held to a higher standard, frankly. And then you got to think about like, okay, what risks does my 8-year-old have on Instagram? What does that mean? How can I view what's on Instagram? Well, there's ways you can do that with, certain monitoring systems. I don't know if that kind of answered your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
That's sort of
Mhm.
Well,
what I
and
think about
I
it.
I think that gets at it where, I guess I just personally have not paid very, very close attention to the policy conversations, mostly because to that point, right? That I don't, I kind of don't care. Like there's a, I care in as much as, let me back up. I care in as much as it's going to help the general population in some places, some ways. But when we're talking specifically within faith community, it's kind of like, well, the standards are even, the standards go beyond even those explicit sites, right? It goes beyond that, to your exact point of things that are, there are things that are healthy and good for the mind and the heart and the soul, and there are things that are not. And so, and the things that are not, there's plenty of things on that list that will remain accessible apart from any governmental legislation or any sort of other policies that are put into place. So yeah, I think that's a helpful
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, we were talking to a Christian, or to who, he was a Christian. I think he was the principal of a public high school, and they had gone kamikaze. They had locked down their school really well. They had done a
Mhm.
great because the school's a different environment. You
Mhm.
can be there. But the situation he ran into really sadly was that there were students making their own pornography,
Oh,
filming it,
wow.
and then dispersing it. And at that point, you go, okay, as Christians, we can diagnose this. That's a sinful heart,
Yeah.
and to some degree shocking, but also in line with our theology.
Mhm.
Like you, the heart's an idol factory.
They will find a way. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And so that becomes discipleship. That changes from tech questions. It's still tech questions, but it becomes so much more a discipleship question, which
Mm.
that's not any easier of a question for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
With I mean, you guys have obviously, I mean, over these last 2 years with developing all the things that you have developed, I mean, that's coming obviously, that's coming from a place of you're being asked you're being asked about these things. These have become kind of pertinent top line questions, and a desire for resources. What's your general um sense of parents out there today, how they're feeling? Do they feel like they're gaining ground?
Mm,
Do they feel like do they feel like they are um at the tail end of things, just sort of being reactionary,
ye
and then hoping for the best, and kind of what feels like otherwise just this tsunami of whatever in front of them?
Totally. Totally. Uh, that's such a good question. It's interesting because it all depends on the age of the parent.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so I'm 27. My age group has a couple of, if they were married early, they got a couple of 5-year-olds kicking around.
Mhm.
And so, but yet me, like I was right. I just scraped into Gen Z. So like I think the best of both worlds. I'm a digital native, but I also like actually touched grass when I was a child. So,
Right. Yeah.
I remember I just remember dial-up internet. So like hallelujah. Um and so a lot of them are not overwhelmed by technology personally.
Mm.
They're like, "Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with this, but only just." A couple generations up, and it's like, well, fair enough. They only started encountering some of these things later in life just
Mhm.
because that's just part of it. And so I think with a lot of parents that we've talked to, first of all, they're all I expected, when we started getting into this, they were like, "Hey, if you're gonna enter the parenting space, the amount of judgment and criticism you're gonna
Mhm.
get is incredible." We have encountered 0.
Mhm.
None.
Mm.
Every single person has just been like, "Great, I'll take any help I can get, even if I hate most of it." And so, and which has been really nice, actually. Most people are super excited about it, and I think people just don't know the landscape. Like,
Mhm.
where to start? I've even said routers a few times, and I bet there are probably a lot of parents, fair enough, who go, "Router?
Mhm.
Ah, was that the thing? That was the thing I bought that one time when we got the Wi-Fi, right?"
Yep.
And it's like,
Yep.
"Yes, that is the thing you got that one time when you got the Wi-Fi. You probably also have a router modem pack. You probably don't know you have a router
Right.
modem because they used to be 2 devices, now they're together." Andy, you're laughing because you know this,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so do I need to explain to you that a router and modem are 2 different things, but they're technically blah, blah, it gets insufferable. But, what we wanna tell parents is we've got you covered on that. We have a video that's like 15 minutes long that our biggest thing has been to be like, make this thing watchable and
Mhm.
accessible. I can baseball pitch you all the information, and that's so unhelpful because that's never been the problem. The
Mhm.
information's always been out there. It's just trying to coalesce that or bring that together in a framework that makes sense. That's actually like you can actually pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Um, that's the big thing. I guess maybe I don't know if I'm answering your question, except that most parents are just like, they're not aware there's a problem, but most of the time when you know there's a problem, but it's just you can't figure out what to do about it, it just goes, deal with it later.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Yeah.
well,
yeah.
and I think too, part of the reason you've had zero like pushback on that is because of the fact you've said, "Hey, pornography is an issue." And you've exposed that. You've showed that in the documentary, and now you're
Mhm.
saying, "Yes, I may not be a parent myself or whatever, or have lots of experience here, but I know what's going on. Like I am in this age where I've seen this. I've grown up with most of this stuff, but and I know what to do. So I think that's probably part of the reason that you've had some success, success in that where you're had or not. I don't want to say success. Where you've had zero pushback on that.
Amen. And like most things, if you just are somewhat humble going into it, like I
Mhm.
love listening to parents give me their thoughts on this thing. Most people are just it's more and I actually get a kind of a free pass because I don't have kids. My the other half of the ministry, John Michael Bout,
Mhm.
he's got a whole bunch of kids. So, but I get like carte blanche. No one's going to criticize me for how I do it. Like, I can just be like, I don't know, but like, do you want help? And then they're like, yep, great. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah. Um, Jake, talk to me about this a lot of conversation here in this last year, last couple of years around around purity, kind of purity culture stuff. And,
Mhm.
and I'll show you how I tie this in because I think it touches on our some unhealthy attitudes that Christians, especially us in the kind of evangelical, more conservative space, maybe have encountered, which it just feels like the backlash. And me, I was in youth ministry for a long, long time, and I feel like I probably ended my youth men right around the COVID times, just in time to not feel the full wave of because as kids were going into lockdowns and things like that, and more on like more and more on devices. I my suspicion is that this just got worse, but
Yeah.
um the idea of just really asking the question, what is it, because you guys have such a theological foundation around this, which I think is just so immensely helpful. What is it about um our understandings of sexuality in terms of what we're communicating to our kids
Mm.
that has harmed us so much? Because we have the theological framework, I think the biblical framework to address this very, very well. And yet you've seen the outcomes. You are well aware of it. You are aware of the struggles. We know the percentages and all of that. How have we wrongly communicated this? How have we wrongly lived this out? Because I think the proof is in the pudding that something has gone haywire here within our communities, despite the fact of the sort of the foundational theological resources that we have.
Mm.
I'm curious on your insight, what you've experienced in the conversations that you have had, because clearly, and this is my own. I'm doing my rant in a form of a question. Clearly, for all our talk about purity, we aren't and are not
Mhm.
getting more so. So
Mhm.
what what the crap is going on, man? What is the deal?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna do my best to kind of navigate that, but you've like kind of cracked open a few firecrackers and
Sure,
thrown them
yeah,
at my
as I
and
do. You're welcome.
yeah. So it's like there's gonna be a soundbite or two that I might look back and go, that could have been probably articulated better, or I might have been wrong. It's really interesting because you said the purity culture movement. Um, this is slight tangent. We'll go back. I'm about to start my doctoral work in the area of modesty.
Yep.
So yes, because that's not controversial in the slightest.
No.
And boy,
I really hope
trust
the
me.
listeners pick up on the like there's a tone of sarcasm there. Anyway,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please. No, I'm very excited about this will come back. I'm really interested in some of the ideas of beauty and shame and embodiment and
Mm,
clothing, purity, all these conversations in how we conduct ourselves publicly with the clothing that we wear. That's
Mhm.
a
mhm,
really dirty way of saying, how the heck do you talk about modesty in
Mhm.
a
yeah,
way that makes any sense?
yep.
So that's going to be the next 4 years of my life. one of the big pieces of that is the interesting phenomena of the late 90s, early 2000s. That was the heyday of purity culture. And that's the I Kiss Dating Goodbye
Yep.
Hmm.
thing.
Right.
And then sort of now we bounce about a decade or so, decade and a half, 2 decades. And we have sort of the deconstruction side of things that's wrapped up in sort of the church hurt pushback of all of that. And so immediately, if you got your head screwed on, you kind of go, there's something there,
Mm.
there's something valid there, right? Like I yeah, the purity culture movement made some promises. And again, the purity culture
Yeah.
movement,
Yeah. The many, the
like
many,
the many
yeah, because we're talking about it as kind of this monolith, which obviously it was not at all. And all various,
exactly.
and all we kind of have is, I think Andy and I think of, because we're old. There were just some distillations of that kind of seeped
Yeah.
through. But so we use that term, but for me to point directly at, say, like, oh, it was this organization or this church or whatever, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist.
Hmm.
So just to be
Yeah.
fair and clear, I guess.
Totally. And it's hard too because like, let's say should we create the purity culture as a monolith? What you might be able to say is they promised um basically just euphoria, sex in marriage for till kingdom come, as long as you just kept it in your pants and kind of put your hands behind your back. It was very simplistic, just obey these set of
And
rules.
be a virgin. Like
Yeah.
virginity, like that's the thing that I heard again and
Totally.
again is virginity was the goal. Virginity, virginity, virginity. You see these chants in youth groups like virginity is cool, virginity, and it seemed like that was the goal.
Yeah.
Do you feel like I'm getting that reasonably
100%.
accurate? Okay.
100%. And what's interesting is I've talked to certain people who made a lot of mistakes during that era, and the things that they would get up to
Right.
technically check the box
Right.
of,
Hmm.
and then again, it was very, but but I've had some really interesting conversations. I read the most interesting book called A Return to Modesty by Wendy Schelt, I think it was. Now she's a kind of a Jewish atheist, so it kind of comes with that interesting perspective of like
Hmm.
a lot of sort of religious carryover respect. So not atheist in like the snarky sense.
Yep.
She wrote it in 97, which was
Mm.
the year that I came out. And what she would talk about, the cultural pressure she faced is unlike we face now.
Mm.
So what she would have would be genuine pressure. So the tabloids would say such horrible things as um how to tamp down, like the type of the cultural milieu was conversations about how do you tamp down emotional attachment after a fling?
Yeah.
Like how do you get rid of
Mm.
Yeah.
it?
That
And it was
pesky,
very
that pesky emotional attachment.
yes. Well, and it was grungy. It was,
Mm.
Yeah.
huh? You sleeping around? Because you should be. And if
Yep.
you aren't, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting. So that's not a part of my experience. I'm way too young for that. But that's what the period culture is reacting to.
Hmm.
Like even like some of the sitcoms that were had their heyday there was like the ha ha ha, we all sleep together and this
Hmm.
is very funny laugh.
Yeah.
My generation, when I go to the high school, um, I've been to a few different schools. I remember the first one I went to was I went to school for advertising. So it was just crazy, coked out, tattooed up, mushroom taking creatives, about as liberal as you could ever
Hmm.
hope for. And they found out that me and a close friend of mine were Christians and that we didn't sleep around. Almost on the whole, they would just go, huh, you know what? Fair enough. Good for you guys. And then when we talk to them, we'd be like, yeah, you know what? We're tired. We know this casual sex is vapid. And they'd throw their hands up. And honestly, I remember very quickly, even if I wanted to sleep around, I couldn't because most of the people I genuinely had a level of respect for the path that we chose. They
Mm.
Yeah.
thought it was pretty cool. They didn't want to mess around with that. And that held true for my whole time
Mm.
in secular undergrad. Now, again, people will have different experiences for sure. But my take is culturally, people are like, and this is actually more the secular, they're kind of just exhausted with the effects of the sexual revolution. Um, there's been a few books against the sexual revolution by Perry. I forget what Louise Perry. She wrote a whole book. Like there's a whole feminist movement who are
Yeah.
basically looking at the revolution, being like, "Hey, this didn't do much
Hmm.
for us." Like sexual proper kind of 60s, 70s,
Yep.
and then Christians, we have our own subspace. This is so much more than you asked for. Christians have their own subspace of like the church hurt, church to deconstruction, anti-purity culture thing. My intuition is there's more bad actors in there
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling that fire of
Mm-hmm.
encouraging. And I want to be sensitive to like genuinely sensitive to the people who felt the worst of the purity culture movement and who have felt church. I mean, there's no lack of that out there. I
Mhm.
genuinely,
Yeah.
people have been through so much. But to kind of glamorize the deconstruction world and to make it kind of sexy to
Yep.
talk about purity and to like dis purity, dis modesty, you're not building up a really robust biblical ethic ground up. And so maybe to try and land the plane, when I feel like we get to come at a really interesting place right now where most people are kind of like a little like storm tossed by this whole thing where they're going like, I don't know if like that one Instagram reel that like talked about how evil the purity culture was, I don't know if that quite landed. I'm really sure my parents who didn't talk to me any about this at all, God bless them, but they weren't equipped to do this. I don't think they did it right. So the middle ground somewhere,
So,
and
so
we're
Jake,
looking for it.
can I pitch you my middle ground? I want to test this out, and I feel really fortunate to have you because you're in so many more broad conversation. Because as someone who is developing resources, I'm sure it feels like you're in a lot of broad conversations, right? You're like, hopefully you have a sense, and I think you do, of like kind of you're sampling a lot of different places at all given times, and it's like, okay, what's the common themes? What are the themes that are emerging? Which I think is a really strong, like, gives you some confidence. Like when you start hearing kind of these overlapping things, it's like, okay, we're on the right track. We're like, we kind of are gauging right. Here's what I'm curious about. I'm curious about if the conversation is not about purity, virginity, all of that. And this ties in, by the way, with with sexual content consumption and all of that. What about this word of chastity, like this of chasteness? I am intrigued by this because it is first of all, it is a more ancient term to use.
Uh-huh.
I think more biblical in a lot of ways. Like tying into this idea of, and I'm recovering Wesleyan, so the holiness thing is like, important to me.
I'm team holiness too.
Yeah, okay.
Content.
uh we'll edit that out. No, but a greater sense of, to your point, like, and I think it touches on ideas of modesty, of like, okay, I have been given this gift of a body. The whole thing is a gift, and it is to be stewarded and shepherded properly. The whole thing, and it's
Mhm.
not it's not okay just to have a conversation about what mechanically what do I do or not do with my parts, the parts of my body. Um,
Uh,
right. And then also, but then mindsets attached to that.
So I just looked up the definition of chastity because
Yeah.
I'm always curious about like what the words
Yeah,
actually mean.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know it, but I want to read it from the
Yeah.
dictionary. So it says the state of practice of refraining from experimental or especially from all sexual intercourse, vows of
Yeah.
chastity. So
Yeah.
I like the whole like experimental because it's not just how
Right.
far can I go before I
Right.
cross that line. It's just the whole thing.
Because Jake, the questions that I have fielded as a youth worker for years, that how far is too far, I think comes from it's a troubling mindset. I think comes from not a mindset of chastity, but a mindset of elevated, like where virginity is the goal. Like, just don't do the thing. Whatever else is second, third of tertiary concern, just don't have sex before you're married. And as long as you do that, you're going to be okay. But by the way, if you do fail in that area, God help you. Like, then what? Right? Because and that's where my heart breaks so much for our young people who are surrounded with this hypersexualized stuff all the time. They're going to, let's just be clear, they are going to make mistakes. What is the road back for them? What is the path back? And I just wonder if this chastity thing is like, if that's something, chasteness, and I know this sounds like old timey language, but this chasteness is a route is a route back for them, is a way, because it's a heart, it's a holistic heart, mind, body, soul way of thinking of like, um I I have a life to steward here
Yeah.
in how I'm presenting, what I am revealing to the world, what I'm putting out there to the world, and not just in terms of like my my persona, but in terms of how I can honor God and honor his people with this life that I have been given.
Mhm.
And yes, to be in the best place relationally that I can be with God, to be in the best place relationally in a very related way with my future spouse, with my future, my future mate, like,
Mm.
um because I think for, again, for Andy and I, who are just a smidge older than yourself, Jake, I know that going into marriage, I mean, I've been married, let's see, 19 years this summer. Andy, a few more years
20,
than that.
21 this summer.
Yes. So, and I know that when I'm guessing, I know won't speak for Andy, but I'm guessing going in, and back in those days, coming out of conservative Christian communities, going into marriage, it's like I don't really actually know properly how to think about sex
Mhm.
now that
Mhm.
I'm allowed to do it.
Right.
Like,
Well, going back to your point, when you're talking about how like what the crap do we do if we
yeah,
make that mistake? Because they're
right.
especially, and again, this is going off on a whole other tangent from what we originally brought you on for. But I think
Because
with
what I would say, a tangent, but it's related to how people are now,
right,
what they're pursuing and what they're looking
yeah,
for on the pornography side. I think this is what it's. I guess I'm just trying to connect the
yeah.
dots on that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
no, I was gonna say I think the word chastity, where you're not saying just don't have sex.
right.
You're saying like be like pure with your
Yeah.
life, like who
Yeah.
you are. Like that
Mhm.
also allows for more grace and forgiveness,
Correct.
just like any other sin does. But because you're not saying, oh, did the
Right. And
ultimate sin,
there's no coming back.
ultimate sin.
Yeah.
Whereas you're just saying, like here, you're saying,
There is a path for you to
right,
take. There's a path for you to take that is God's best for you. You may
Mhm.
deviate from that path, but that path will always exist for you forever. And by his grace, by his mercy, by the things that are offered to us, we can find ourselves there again. I, Jake, I'm going to guess that in your work with Into the Light, I'm going to guess that there you have just seen the hunger for that, like for
Oh.
a, like, how do we come back from this thing?
Mhm.
I got in deep, I got in way over my head, I found myself overwhelmed, and probably in the darkest and by the way, men and women
mhm.
alike, clearly the numbers are going up and to the right, for both groups. um what hope have people found? Because I think it's just such a hopeless, it can feel so hopeless in light of what we're
Yeah.
talking about here. Like, if it's, oh, I've done the unpardonable sin, I've, I'm, and I, or and whether it's in my, because I think previous sexual behavior indicates further sexual behavior, including, and that's the connecting the dots, including porn addictions and seeking these things out online. um what do you have a sense that people, like, what do they really long for? Like, what are they really longing for?
Mhm.
Where are they finding hope? What can be done? Like, what really can be done? Because I think it just, like, geez, and I would say,
Yeah.
it's like, do I just need one more video to, to like, there's, uh 'cause, and I'm not saying that you're advocating for that, but there's something that can be done. And you obviously, I mean, you're dedicated the past 2 years to this.
Oh
Um,
my god.
there's
Yeah.
and more. And so what, like, what's possible for people? Where can they go from here?
Totally. Um, the big it's kind of like I'm gonna give the most obvious answer ever. It's like, and this is just I don't mean this glibly. It just sounds so glib. The gospel.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it becomes, because when you're kind of touching on, it's like this question of the unpardonable sin and lines you cross and how you react to that. And then you have this topic of pornography, which is just a mire that just sucks you in and makes you live a life that feels like like your existence is unpardonable.
Mhm.
Then you have confusion and then the relational tension that things like pornography brings, or in families, the things that crossing a line would lead once that gets found out. You kind of have all these pockets of issues. At the end of the day, it's like the clarity that the gospel brings about your identity as a human, saying like, okay, all of this, are you a redeemed child of God? Let's figure that out,
Hmm.
because like unrepentant sin might mean you're not.
Mm.
But if you feel of the Holy Spirit working conviction in you and a desire for the fruits of the Spirit, then that's a sign that you're a Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian? That means you are positionally loved by God. And that's like a secure reality. And so, and then the gospel, like, well, the gospel gives us an anthropology to expect a degree of failing, especially from people who aren't Christians.
Hmm.
But if anyone says he has no sin, he deceives himself, right? And so really like, and that, where do you get that? I mean, that comes from good Christian community and good preaching. So that becomes like, this becomes questions where I, like on the biggest scale possible, I just say, get yourself plugged into a local church that
Hmm.
preaches, and and that will start to just a really good gospel just start bleeding into all these areas of life. That becomes that's truth that I will proclaim to the day God takes me home. When it comes to specifically these issues of pornography and yeah, I think I've spent less time. It's interesting. So the next resource that we're probably going to build is a podcast series on dating and pornography.
Hmm.
Mm.
I think right now I've got thoughts. Obviously, I'm a bit rusty on exactly how I would muse through that incredibly complex process of two young, immature, um, adventurous individuals coming together in this thing we call dating and making it to marriage with the existence of pornography and all the temptations that come with two people who really like each other spending time together.
Yeah.
Navigate that.
Hmm.
You guys were, I don't know, Andy, as much, but like you guys were youth pastors, what kind of a dumpster fire and just life that
Yeah.
has.
Well, I'll just say this: boys are not doing well. Boys aren't
I
doing
have
well. They're not, and they're not dating. And
Mhm.
in the new digital culture, they are getting shut down. Like on the online culture, the online dating culture too. They're getting shut down. Um, and here's you kind of mentioned this. I think you touched on this when you were uh, right now, the content that I listen to on sort of youth culture and what's going on, especially with young adults and young people, I'm listening to a lot of like classical liberal philosophers about this stuff because they
Mm.
sound they I don't know how to say this. They don't fit in with the rest of their crew anymore because they're still pursuing after truth and they're seeing these trends happen. They're like, we've got
Mhm.
to account for this somehow, right? Turns out this sexual revolution thing, it has not landed well, and there's dead bodies everywhere, right? Um, our young men are not doing well. Our young men are not dating. They are, and a lot of that is connected to their increased use of pornography. They're getting sexual release through that, and it's kind of just making them. Um, just not get out there into the world.
Mhm.
And then uh Christian or not, like by the way, like I think that's because kind of in general, there's not a healthy that's just my perspective. I really, really think that we don't have a good, again, this probably goes back to this purity, chastity, da da da, whatever. Like, what does a holy relationship look like, a godly relationship look like between a young man and a young woman who are trying to discern if they want to spend the rest of their lives together, trying to decide if they want to all the family stuff, because the unspoken thing that we all know is like when you are entering into those in the initial steps, the very initial steps of that relationship,
Mhm.
when the dating thing or whatever, there is in the back of your mind, it's like, well, we're discussing whether or not what we're trying to do is navigate whether or not we're going to have sex eventually. Like,
Yeah.
that's right. Like that's kind of out there. And yet, um, uh, we like what happens in the meantime? What happens before all of that? How is the relationship invested in the
Mhm.
meantime? Knowing that more than likely both of them are engaging with pornographic material in the interim, and wow, to sort of like help them get along,
Mhm.
while they're developing this relationship, which just is
Hard.
crazy. That's
Mhm.
so hard. Yeah.
My sense of it too is like, you have something like maybe the transgender movement, which most reasonably solid Christians can look at that, hopefully with a good sense of sadness and compassion, but just go, no,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
Right.
pretty
Yep.
straightforward. God created men, God created women. But what we don't realize is how much of the philosophical presuppositions that led to that bleed into just the day-to-day life. So
100%. Right.
so you have these things of like these transhumanist flares of like the online me is just as valid a me as the embodied me.
Mhm.
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 And so and that's a snarky way of, or that's a fancy pants way of just saying, y'all spend too much time online. That's glib, but like what that communicates about what it means to be an embodied human being, it starts to devalue that as just a created good.
Mhm.
And then you have like the only way I can make sense of these categories and the only clarity that I've been able to bring to all of them is to really shift into like kind of Catholic natural law language, just creation norms of
Mhm.
like, look, you were made a male or a female for like in the image of God as equals for a purpose. Why are you different? Why are men and women? There's only one intelligible reason, and that is to form a family unit for the purpose of creating children. And like that sounds callous. There's a lot of more beautiful ways of saying that, but that adds an intelligibility
Yeah.
to this project. If it's like, and then you start spinning that off and to be like, okay, what's the purpose of sexuality? It's like it has its only, and like again, this is getting so abstract, and so much of our mission is to take abstract. Dude, I've read so many Catholics
Yeah.
the last
Yeah.
like few years, but is to take these conceptual categories of what the very purposes of sexuality are, finding their clarity and telos in marriage for the purposes of unity, covenantal frameworks, procreation, and then make that simple and sing.
Yeah.
Make that something that just goes, "Oh, that's really beautiful. I'm not just trying to scrape the best parts before
Mhm.
marriage."
Yeah.
But if you can, oh, it's hard. But if you can get, and you can. So there's two ditches here. One is to simplistically go, tell the youth the right things. And the other thing is to throw your hands up and say no one gets it. And that's not true. There are 16-year-olds who can look you in the eye and go, you know what? I really want to be married. And if I can't be married, dating's foolish. And I want to do this properly. And they square their shoulders and give it their best shot.
Mhm.
Like God bless the parents who worked hard to get them.
Mhm.
But if it comes, I guess maybe my answer would be it comes from my job and the jobs of the pastors and leaders is to really understand, read some good books to understand the currents that are shaping the culture. I mean, have you guys read or you've heard of Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Truman?
Yeah. Yep.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Having these books that help us understand some of these ideas of like why aren't people dating right now? It's like, well, there's 101 really, really scary reasons. And then presenting a compelling reason that a 16-year-old can go, I can sign up for that life.
Yep.
That starts to give them the reasons why you would ever like, because if it's just pleasure, if it's just like, look, sex is to feel it, then yeah, you try and chase as much of that as you can before marriage and
100%.
get the rest of the goods afterwards. Like
Right.
this is not complicated.
Yeah.
Just let me know what I can get away with before God, and I'll get as much as I
Mhm.
can.
Yep.
If that's your framework, and so the framework to go like, no, 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 like again, all the straightforward stuff of saying, yeah, man, God made a beautiful thing that's really painful when it's not in marriage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And getting someone to sign up for that, and then saying, all right, also, let's have a good theology of sin. we mess up.
Yep.
And let's bring grace into this.
Mhm.
That was a bit of a word salad, but 'cause, I
Lovely.
mean,
Yeah, it was great.
there's
Lovely.
books on this, and this is a podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, with this into the light work that you guys are doing, it's just so important. What are you like when we talk a year from now? What do you hope that you're telling us a year from now about outcomes, achievements, impact?
Hmm.
What's like, man? What's your dream in all of that?
Well, we're a ministry. We have a vision. Our vision is to see a generation of Christians who love God's design for sexuality and are equipped to face
Mm,
every form of sexual brokenness.
mm,
And so in a year from now, I hope to tell you about maybe some resources we got in the pipeline, but with regard to these parenting resources, I just hope to give some fun stats that just say a lot of parents have been able to watch these really amazing teachers that we've brought together to teach on this. And I hope to get people to just be like, "Hey, I made my home safer."
mm-hmm,
And
Mm.
I actually think, like, I'm very sure my 7-year-old hasn't discovered pornography, and I hope he can actually make it maybe to 13, 14, 15 before he ever encounters it. And we've been talking to him. He knows what it's going to be when he encounters it.
mm-hmm,
When
Mm.
he sees it, he'll go, "That was the thing mom and dad were talking about." And I know what I do. I shut it down and I know I can come to mom and dad and I can tell them I saw something and I know they're not going to yell at me.
yeah,
And like they have a script that gives them, and these things are things that take time. They're messy, they're
Mhm.
hard. But if I can have some of those stories, I would be praising God because, like, oh man, just a vision of a generation of kids who can get into the dating process and say, "You know what? I actually haven't seen any porn."
Mhm.
yeah,
And I don't know if we talked about this. That's my story. So my mom, I don't remember a time where Covenant Eyes wasn't on my phone. Back in the day, about 15 years ago, it was a glitchy piece of software, and I loathed it. I listen, gentlemen, I had hermit crabs and I wanted to research those hermit crabs and I was researching away. And then the word sex was on those websites
yep,
and Covenant has blocked it. And I took my laptop to mom and I said, "Mom, it blocked my hermit crab website." And mom patiently typed it in. I'm sitting there. This 12-year-old me is huffing and puffing. I hated Covenant Eyes so much. Now we're partners with them by the grace of
Mhm.
God. I started realizing 12-year-old me, 11-year-old me was annoyed. 14, 15-year-old me got it.
mm,
Mm.
I started going, "Okay, I'm a little older now. I'm a little past puberty. I understand why." Because I didn't. I remember talking to my mom going, "Why do people look at naked bodies? It makes
yeah,
no sense."
sure,
Mhm.
right, yeah,
I started cluing in. I started going, "All right, yeah, I get it. Mom's been pretty clear about what this stuff is. I know I can talk to her about it. I'm gonna avoid this stuff." By the grace of God, never got hooked on pornography. And I know from working with guys who struggled with pornography, like where I'm in accountability groups, discipleship stuff, it's just their lives are hard. It's harder to
Mhm.
just do. They get intrusive thoughts, everything that comes along with it. It's a more difficult road, and my life is significantly easier because I don't have quite the same
Mhm.
set of things. I'm a sinner saved by grace like everyone else, but I really hope more people get to have a story similar to mine.
yeah,
And I hope parents can go to sleep a little bit easier, not knowing that they're perfect, not knowing that they've done everything that can be done, but going to sleep going, "I actually locked down my house properly.
Mhm.
Before God, I've done the best I can, and I've actually done a lot." And sorry, I'm ranting, guys. You
No,
guys
you're
asked me
good.
that's
You're
questions.
good,
good.
The best part about this tech series that for me, which we didn't know going into it, you can do it. Like you can lock your house down to a degree of radical safety. It's actually possible. It'll cost a little bit of money with some routers and some accountability software. It takes some time. It might involve chucking a device or two, although we
Mhm.
try and avoid that. But at the end of the day, you can go to sleep at night knowing if sexually explicit material comes into this house, I'll know about it, and I can
Mhm.
have gospel-centered conversations as a result of it. That's one pillar. The other pillar is talking about your children from a young age about embodiment. God made our bodies good, and that men and women are good, and all these things. I'm excited that this stuff is possible, and I'm really I'm hyped about this.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I really appreciate your passion and what you guys are doing with the project overall, not just the documentary, but the documentary was amazing. I watched it when we had you on the first time. But not just that, but the stuff that you're doing now to take that
Mm,
further, because like you said, it's great to bring awareness to the the epidemic, the pandemic, what not pandemic, but whatever it is, the pornography that's out there. But now
mm.
you're also able to say, this is what we're doing to help parents and families have this conversation, and what do we do about it? So yeah, I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing in this ministry.
Yeah, it is the Lord's work. It is important. Um, and I don't know. I just think more and more people I think are being, and I'm glad to hear kind of as you've outlined. I think more and more people are open to this conversation. Some of our more conservative communities, boy oh boy, it feels a little. I know some people cringe about it, but I will say I think those days are behind us more and more so. Like it's just so blatant and in our face. Like, eventually, we all have to throw our hands up in the air and look up to God and say, "Okay, help!" Like
Hmm.
we all need help with this. We really, really do. We can't just say, "Well, never, never, never my children." It's like, well, the stats don't agree with you. It's all of our kids, and we need to keep them. We need to keep them safe and prepare them for things as best as possible. So I'm grateful for you guys and that you're doing that. It's good
Um,
work, Jake. Um,
I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful that you know, I mean, there's a lot there's a lot of things to be grateful for. The people, the men and women who speak in this series are incredible.
Mm.
I mean, like Abby Halberstadt. I mean, there's probably I doubt you many of your listeners because this is for dudes and dads. Abby Halberstadt has written a couple books for moms. Dude, Emma's for Mama slaps. It is
Hmm.
such a good book. Like I was so like we filmed with her right for this series.
hmm
I read that book and I was so encouraged by it. And I'm not the target audience
Hmm.
even a little bit.
Yeah.
So we just got her just walking parents through this issue. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And like every chance I get, I shout out like our donors. We've got a
Hmm.
team of, I mean, these things cost, I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
And people just believe that this stuff's important. And we've got a whole team of monthly donors and some one-time supporters who like just want to see this stuff happen. So something I didn't say is January 18th, these all come out and they're all free. So you can
Awesome.
go into thelightministries.ca and you can just immediately start watching all of this just
Yeah. And
as
we
you
and
will.
we hope everybody listening to this will just absolutely help support this stupid business model that you have set up that just makes no sense this side of heaven, Jake. What in the world? But clearly you're out here to help people and we're
I
grateful for
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm enough of a capitalist, God help me, that sometimes I don't question whether going the nonprofit route was the right choice or not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I mean, we're in this now, and the reality is, I'm so grateful because sometimes we'll get messages from young kids,
Oh
like
yeah.
from
Hmm.
like young kids who just go like, "Hey, I had never told anybody, but I
hmm
found the documentary." So one of the cool things, we've got a really great online team. All of our social media was viewed just under 500,000 times last
Yeah.
year,
Mm.
Yeah.
and so that's kids doom scrolling TikTok who see David Platt and go, "Hey, I know that guy."
Hmm.
They go, "Oh, he's talking about pornography? Into the light. Interesting." And then they go watch it, and they don't have to tell anyone, and they should. But you're 15.
Yeah.
You can expect so much, but they start getting some of those gospel steps. This is, for the old documentary,
Hmm.
and I'm very thankful. I'm so thankful we were able to make that resource free for everybody.
That's
That's
so
nice.
Um,
awesome.
Really
Yeah.
it's
awesome.
really
Yeah. So you mentioned January 18th. This podcast will come out 2 days or on Tuesday just after that. So it'll be
It'll be
awesome.
fresh.
fresh.
Fresh
Yes.
off the presses. Well, hey Jake, obviously we can't let anyone leave our show before this final segment.
Now it's time for Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah.
All right.
All right, Joel, you can go 1st.
We're gonna go first.
You
So,
go first.
so Jake, these are questions that you can't prepare for. They're random. They're all over the place. And we'll see what happens. So my first question to you, Jake, for those of us living down here outside of Canada, what do you feel like Canada's finest culinary contribution is that we don't know enough about down here?
Oh my goodness, not even close. Poutine. Okay, you would
That's the
listen,
most
listen.
Canadian thing he could have said.
Yes.
Oh, no, but here's the thing. You Americans would think, God bless you, you would think that you had the market cornered on the most calorie-laden, grease-filled
Yeah,
food
yeah,
possible. It's not even close. Us Canadians crush
yeah.
poutine. That, like, all those fries and the cheese curds and the gravy drizzled. It is beautiful. It will put you into cardiac arrest. It is one of the handful of things that will make it into the new kingdom. I'm so thankful.
You heard it here first. Okay.
Love it.
There
Love
we
it.
go.
All right. I'm
Good.
going to hunch down when we get to heaven and
That's
see if we
good.
can have some together.
Yep.
Which talent would you like to most have that you don't currently have?
Ooh, that's really, really interesting. I'd like to paint. Is that a
Okay.
talent or a
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
skill?
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh, yeah. I don't have that talent.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to grow. Maybe I'll tell you, I'll double tap you guys in 20 years when I get a spare minute. I want to learn how to paint. But right now, I would be a disaster at it. It sounds fun, good cup of coffee, just painting.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'd be for that.
That's good. My next question for you is, Jake, what book should I be reading right now?
Uh, any of the Jeeves and Wooster series by P.G. Woodhouse. Do you want me to tell you why?
Would
Yes,
I
please.
do?
Please.
Oh, I'm gonna pitch you guys on this. So I could have given you so many more holy answers, but we're going with this one.
I love it.
So P.G. Woodhouse was a humorist in the early 20th century. He was a contemporary of like Chesterton, kind of a lot of those guys. And so he wrote these series of very stupid novels. That are the Jeeves and Wooster is just the collection. It's a category, and they have all these different things. Joy in the Morning is the best one. It's the funniest. The plots are irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's the writing. His command of the English language is so funny and the best way to do this, if you guys are audiobookers, if you're not, become it. Stephen Fry, you can buy on Audible. Stephen Fry has the entire Jeeves and Wooster collection on Audible.
Okay.
And Jeeves and Wooster, so Bernie Wooster is sort of this like late Victorian, not even really existing, but this guy, late Victorian noble guy who has like way too much money. Like he just has infinite money. It doesn't matter. And so he lives his life in kind of like, doing the most ridiculous things ever. And he's like a really well-bred guy, he went to Cambridge, but he's kind of an idiot at the same time. And Jeeves is his butler, who's a genius and is like renowned the country over as just like this brilliant guy. And they're these silly, and all the plots are like literally he accidentally gets engaged and has to figure his way out of it. Or like he makes the bet and can't he just like doesn't want to pay it. So he has this whole caper. They're silly, they're light, they're so stinking funny. And there's nothing that can pull me out of a funk faster than just nonstop giggling at Jeeves and Wooster by P.G. Woodhouse, read by Stephen Fry. Get it on Audible. I should get a referral link for that. I recommend it.
Andy, I'm going to say right now, that I've asked this question frequently.
Yes, you have.
This is the best answer
I think so.
to this question I've ever gotten.
The best answer. Go read it and then get back to me.
Yeah. Because I say best answer because it's also the most. It was the deepest dive and the most unexpected. So
right.
I'm now I'm like I have to go look into this because I'm captivated, Jake. Okay, Andy, next question.
I could have been dumb and just told you to read like Thomas Aquinas or something. Like,
I would
whatever.
have rejected that answer wholeheartedly. So,
all right. So we know that you have had a great job right now. Your job is doing this ministry and producing this stuff for lots of people, and we appreciate that. But what is the worst job that you've ever had?
The worst job I ever had.
and this could have been a temporary job. This could have been a one-time
Yeah,
job.
anything
This
that you're
could
getting paid for.
Yeah, that you received.
Oh, that's get paid for it?
Well, maybe not.
Maybe you were this is a volunteer job that went wrong. That could also be the case.
Here's the answer I'll give. I'm a nerd. I'm an artist. I hand wavy stuff. But I grew up on a farm. So like I can do some serious farm work. That doesn't mean I like serious farm work.
Mm.
So there was a season where we had a calf on the farm.
Mm.
The mother, I forget what exactly the situation was, but some lucky young lad was voluntold to bottle feed this calf every morning. And oh, doesn't your heart flutter at the adorableness of it? No. Little old me, had to haul this massive bottle at this like 120-pound calf is trying to run me into oblivion as I'm trying to like bottle feed the thing.
As
Am I whining? Yes.
Andy has raised a lot of calves actually, and I
Okay.
feel like he's really connecting with you.
I am.
over this.
Well, it is the very cutest thing. The baby, and it's the bottle. I absolutely hate it too. Since then, we've got bottle broken calves because we don't. We just I hate it.
He's like, no more. No.
and not
doing
only
it."
that, but it's expensive. The
my
milk replacer is like $80 a bag.
Holy smokes.
It's ridiculous.
Okay, no more milk
And-
replacer.
Honestly, if it was one calf on the off time, I'd probably love that now. 12-year-old me had better things to do, like play Minecraft or something. And
100%.
6 o'clock in the morning, that was not my
No.
yeah. It
All
was probably
right.
good.
Jake, my final question to you. Again, for those of us that are we Americans down here in the U.S.
I was gonna say Southern Canadians.
Southern, south of the
I'll take that.
Canada. Yeah. Where in Canada do I need to take my family sometime on a family vacay? Where should I be going?
You're gonna go up through Detroit.
I like the start of this already. Great.
Yeah, you're gonna go up through Detroit. You're gonna keep going through Sarnia up to Hamilton. You're gonna go past Hamilton into the Niagara and visit me for a little bit.
Love it. Thank
And
you.
you're gonna we're gonna get coffee, it'll be great. Then you're gonna backtrack back through Hamilton, and you're gonna head up to another 3 hours up to Tobermory. Tobermory, Canada. All your listeners.
How do you spell this?
Tobermory. It's pretty strict. It's
Okay.
not.
Gotcha.
Tobermory, Canada. The hiking up there, it is the most. I beg your listeners, Google it.
Mhm.
It gorgeous,
Mm.
glass clear lake, massive rocketing up cliffs, just the coolest. And then the actual town of Tobermory is this adorable little folksy town with all these boats and stuff like that. It can't have more than 1,000 people. And then right in the big harbor, if you're lucky enough, you could canoe out there, you could take tours. There's a massive shipwreck that's sunk, huge shipwreck that's sunk in like 10 feet below the surface. So if you can maneuver your way over there, you can dive it and just like go down and swim. It is super, super pretty. Tobermory, Canada, 10/10 recommend.
All right.
The only complaint that I have with that is I don't just want to get coffee with you. I want to get some poutine also. So
Oh yeah, we'll make it work.
All right.
Okay, we can help you out. I got a feeler. We'll make it work.
all right, my last question. I'm gonna stick with the Canada theme. All right.
Okay.
Oh, Canada.
I wasn't gonna sing, but
Our home and that's all I know. I get home and native land, and then I black out the rest. But
All right.
anyway, okay.
all right. So every place that I've ever been, in the United States has that one like really, really odd thing that everyone is like, you either need to see it or not see it.
Like the biggest ball of yarn.
Right, or the biggest boot or the biggest chair. What is the weirdest, strangest like sightseeing thing in Canada? Or just in general, like something weird and strange.
Because we down here, we believe that there's a lot of weirdness up in Canada. So we feel like there's something up there that we don't know about.
So here's the problem. That's a very American question. I'll tell you why. America goes, oh, us. We're like this. Like we have Portland, we have Detroit, we have New York, we have Dallas.
Boston.
Yeah.
We're America. The rest of the world, things, country. So I'm being a little bit snarky. Canada is as diverse city to city, place to place, as every part of Canada is. And so it's like, it's funny because and this is not good, but there are places in the deeper part of Southern Ontario that will run Confederate flags behind their diesel trucks.
Wow.
You're not prepared for that level of subculture.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. alternately, the like the Jamaican population of Toronto
Mm.
is crazy. There's a huge, massive subculture
Mm.
of like Jamaican, hybrid Jamaican infused. It's really, really interesting. Then where I'm from is the Niagara, Upper Niagara area is is Dutch Mecca. So after World War II, so many Dutch immigrants came over
Mm.
here because Canada was really influential in liberating the Netherlands. And so you come over here and you have all these Calvinistic Dutch Reformed churches with like 6'9" white people on every corner, and like me,
Yeah.
less the tall part, but like blonde, blue eyed over here. And so all these little oddities are just yeah, Canada's a great place. Lots of cool things you
Awesome.
can find.
Awesome. Well, I've been there once. I went to the
Yeah.
Niagara Falls, actually. Went up
Mm-hmm.
through, yeah, probably drove right through those towns you were talking about. But yes. So
Yeah, my first trip into Canada was illegally on a canoe. That's all I'm going to say. So,
Love that.
yeah.
Here for that.
Yep.
well, Jake,
Welcome.
you've successfully passed the Dudes and Dads pop quiz,
Well done, Jake.
and
Nailed it.
we thank you so much for being on the show today with us.
Yeah, we're going to make obviously all of the current, past, into the light content easily accessible on our show notes over at dudesanddads.com. Hey, everybody, if you've got ideas for shows or you've got questions or harsh criticisms, we'll take them all.
Yep.
dudesanddads.podcast@gmail.com. It's a great way to shoot us an email if you'd like. Or head over to dudesanddads.com to see future episodes, past episodes, present episodes. We have a time machine over there. It's amazing.
And if you like to support things, you can support our show.
Yes.
By going to dudesanddads.com/support, where you can become a Patreon or PayPal or all of that other jazz.
Send us your money. Hey, everybody, we're so glad to be starting off on season 7. We look forward to the coming year. Until we see you next time, we wish you grace
And peace.